From an overall standpoint, I'm just glad DC finally has some direction. For the longest time with DC properties, Warner Brothers have just been throwing things at the wall to see what stick. And anytime they get the slightest bit of backlash or a movie doesn't make the exact amount of money they think it should make, they usually abandon ship. And this has been going on since the Michael Keaton Batman days. So regardless of how you may feel about James Gunn and Peter Safran, I'm glad DC finally has its own actual studio with people in charge who I know that just because a movie doesn't perform in the exact way they thought it was going to perform, I know they're not just going to jump ship and start everything all over again. It's your boy Eddie of Nerdy Before It Was Cool, and I know I'm late is pretty much my brand at this point. But with that being said, let's get into this chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. There are some things that I'm way more excited about than others. There's some things that I don't really care about at all. But I want to briefly touch on all of them. I'm also going to recommend some comic books and animated movies that you can check out that'll basically kind of prepare you for this new DCU. Let's start out with the movies first, and then we'll get into the series. So the first movie on the docket is going to be Superman Legacy, and it's going to be written and I would assume directed by James Gunn. James Gunn has had a lot of success in his career. He's made his money, he's made his name, but as far as in the comic book space, this is going to be a real test for him. James Gunn definitely has a certain style about him that, for lack of better words, is definitely a lot raunchier than a character like Superman. So I'm really interested to see the dynamic, the tone, and everything else of this movie. I don't know this for sure, but if I had to take a guess, I would assume that his more raunchier elements of his writing are going to be things happening around Superman while keeping him that more wholesome character, and that's where a lot of the comedy is going to come from, just from seeing his other work. He hasn't said much about the plot of this film, and he also hasn't said which comic book runs have inspired him the most when it comes with Superman. I would probably recommend reading All-Star Superman or maybe Superman for All Seasons. We've had the darker, broodier Superman in Snyder's movies, and although I do love me some Man of Steel, I don't think we're going to go back into that bag for this version of Superman. It would be a few different ways you could describe the Authority. You could look at them as sort of a dark Justice League with characters like Apollo, who kind of rivals Superman, and Midnighter, who is kind of like their Batman. There's some pretty brutal anti-heroes. They are on the side of good, but they're more so do anything by any means possible to stop evil. I like that the Superman movie is leading into the Authority because they're really gonna test Superman. Not only do they have Apollo, who can test him physically, but they can also test his entire philosophy. At the end of the day, Superman captures criminals, he gets them sent to jail, but they get out of jail and then they just go right back to committing crimes. So in their mind, in their eyes, Superman is weak. These are the type of characters that James Gunn gravitates to. I'm super excited to see what he does with the Authority and how that conflict is going to clash with Superman, because you know it eventually has to. If you want to read some of the Authority, a good place to start is The Authorities Volume 1 by Warren Ellis. But if you're in a place where you don't really read comics like that, or maybe you're new to comics and you just want to read a couple of issues to see a little bit about these characters, there's a really cool 4-issue story called Superman and the Authority. It's really dope. It starts out in the 60s in the Kennedy's era, where you got Superman being that Superman that we all know and love, and then it slowly, gradually takes us into modern day. In this universe, the Justice Society has already came and gone. A lot of other heroes have already came and gone. So he's gathering a team of him, the New Steel, as well as the Authority. I haven't read all 4 of them yet. I've only read the first 2, but next week when I go back to the comic book store, I'm gonna get those last 2. The next movie is Batman the Brave and the Bold, and no, it's not gonna be like the animated series where it's just a bunch of different heroes teaming up with Batman. But James Gunn did say it's gonna be introducing the Bat family, and the first Robin we're gonna be introduced to is Damian Wayne. I always make the joke that Damian Wayne's my least favorite Robin, but with that being said, I don't dislike him as a character. Do I think he's annoying? Yes, I do. but he's intentionally written to be that way. He's basically Bruce Wayne if he wasn't raised by humble, loving parents. And even though his philosophy is way different than Bruce's because he's been raised by the League of Shadows his entire life, they're a lot alike, which causes a lot of tension, and I think it's a really cool dynamic between the two. For the most part, I'm just happy we're going to be getting a live action Robin in a movie. We haven't seen one in live action in a movie since what, 1996, 97, and that's just way too long. Batman needs a Robin. It's a part of his natural progression as a character, so I'm glad we're finally getting Robin. I wish it was the OG Robin, Dick Grayson, but if Batman is already on to Damian Wayne, that means Dick Grayson exists in this universe. He is alive, hopefully, and more than likely off in Bloodhaven being Nightwing. James Gunn mentioned Grant Morrison's run in his Gods and Monsters speech. Look, I don't say this often, but if you want to see what this series is about, you can just watch the movie instead of reading the comics. The movie is pretty short though. It's only like an hour and 14 minutes. Nightwing is introduced in that movie as well. So if they do a similar structure from the movie, then we might just see Nightwing in this film. Fingers crossed. Next up on the movie docket, we have Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. I really like this version of the character. So with me, if you're going to do a legacy character, you got to make sure to make them very distinctly different from the person they're based off of. And I feel like a lot of the times with Supergirl, they don't do that. They just make her a female version of Clark Kent and Superman. But I like this Woman of Tomorrow idea because Supergirl has a completely different viewpoint on the world than Superman. Not only because she's, well, a different person, but she had a completely different upbringing and relationship with Earth and Krypton. If you want to check out some comics to prepare for this one, obviously read the Woman of Tomorrow one that the film's going to be based off of. Also, I recommend watching Batman and Superman Apocalypse. That movie features Supergirl as well, and it does a really good job in a pretty short period of time of just showing you the different viewpoints of Kara and Clark. I'm excited about this because this opens up that DC Dark universe. This can lead us into so many different things like Justice League Dark and Constantine, Hellraiser, Lucifer. So many different elements of that horror genre of DC that I actually enjoy a lot. Now, I haven't read a lot of Swamp Thing comics. Most Swamp Thing stuff that I've seen has been TV or film. But Swamp Thing is a very interesting and entertaining character. And unfortunately, the show got done dirty. It was on the DC Universe app, but Warner Brothers was being tossed around from company to company. Things were getting cut left and right, and that DC Universe app got cut as well. And most of the shows would go to live on HBO Max or CW, but with the higher budget from all the special effects from Swamp Thing, they didn't get to continue it. But it has one season and it's pretty solid. You should check it out. Now, when it comes to Creature Commandos, I haven't read any comics, I haven't seen anything on TV, so there's not a lot of hype around it for me, but I'm definitely interested to see it. It's all going to be written by James Gunn. These are some weird outcast characters that not many people in the main zeitgeist really know anything about, so he's pretty much going to have autonomy to do whatever he wants. And you can do certain things in animation that you just can't do live action. James Gunn said something interesting and a little iffy to me, which is that all of the animated and live action stuff is going to be cohesive unless it's labeled Elseworld. I think the Elseworld thing is a really good idea. It definitely allows to bring in stories that aren't mainline, and it won't make it to where people have to watch 40 different movies in order to stay in line with movies coming out from DC. So I like that, but I'm just a little skeptical that this can actually work. Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, many people have tried this interwoven universe from animation to TV to film, and it just never really works out the way they want it to. There's always a lot of plot holes, a lot of retcons, and things that just don't quite mesh. And on top of that, they're adding video games in the mix to this. So I'm a little weary of that idea, but we'll see how that goes. Next up is going to be a live action series titled Waller. Viola Davis, she's one of my favorite actors. Her range is crazy. In that first mess of a chopped together by a trailer company Suicide Squad movie, I thought she was one of the shining lights in that film next to Harley Quinn, and I was glad they continued to use her as the future went on and they went and rebooted the series and eventually into Peacemaker. Honestly, I don't have much to recommend you comic book wise about Waller. I would just say go watch Peacemaker if you haven't seen it already. Obviously, she's from the rebooted Suicide Squad film, and there's about 3 animated Suicide Squad movies, one of which is really good, one of which is okay, and of course she was in Justice League Unlimited as well. So you can watch all of those things to kind of catch up on Waller and who she is as a character. Make sure to see what comes from this series that's going to go out into the mainline DCU. Paradise Lost to me sounds like one of the more interesting things on the slate. The main thing I have questions for is what time period this is going to be set in. What I love about Themyscira or Wonder Woman is that she's been around for so long that you can do period pieces pretty much forever until you figure out how you want to work it into the mainline DCU. James Gunn mentioned like Game of Thrones and shows like that as kind of more of a blueprint for this show, and I think that's going to be interesting. I love that we're going to have so many different types and genres of shows and movies. The thing I'm most excited about with this one is also the thing that worries me a little bit. With there being so much lore and history with Themyscira and Wonder Woman, I want Wonder Woman to actually be a part of the DCU and not have her movies and shows just be these Elseworld like things or period piece type things where we never really get to see what she does in her main life actually show up and affect the actual timeline that we're in, if that makes any sense. But anyways, definitely ready to see this thing. Next up, we have a HBO Max series, Lanterns. I was hearing that this was going to be canceled, but apparently they reinvigorated it and found a way to work it into this new DCU plan. The main 2 characters we're going to see is John Stewart and Hal Jordan. I'm sure some of the other Lantern Corps is going to pop up, and I'm definitely interested to see which ones. He said this is going to be a true detective type vibe, and me, I love a good murder mystery. I love a good mystery series. I guess my only concern with this series is the galactic element. I know it is HBO, but if they do a lot of galactic stuff, the budget for this is gonna be very high. And if we're dealing with Green Lanterns, multiple Green Lanterns, I don't want to just see Green Lantern walking around in street clothes on Earth. I don't do much Green Lantern reading, but here are 2 of my favorite Green Lantern books so far. I like Green Lantern stories that deal with a lot of the lanterns. I mean, they're basically space police. I love this Green Lantern 80-page giant because it's just an ensemble of almost all of the characters. I also like the Green Lantern Future State, the one that focuses mainly on John Stewart. The dope thing about those 2 runs is they're a little bit older, so you can probably find them in the 99-cent bins at your local comic book shop. Honestly, my only expectation for this is for it to be funny because, quite frankly, Booster Gold is comedic gold. He's a loser who travels back to the past and uses his knowledge to become a hero. Now, there's been different iterations of Booster Gold. In some iterations, he was more of, like, I guess you could call it a time cop.
I'm supposed to make sure Poet Dude dies every cycle. Anyone interferes, they get fixed. That's just how it goes. I'm sorry.
But James Gunn being James Gunn, he's probably going to use the more comedic aspect of Booster. If you've never seen or read anything from Booster Gold, I would advise you to go check out some Justice League Unlimited. So far for me, that's definitely been my favorite iteration of the character. When it comes to Booster Gold, honestly, I'm kind of interested to see who they get to play him. I think a lot of people could do it for whatever reason. I know he's Deadpool and everybody Everybody says he kind of plays himself in every role he does, but I would kind of like to see Ryan Reynolds be a Booster Gold. But I have a feeling they're probably gonna go a little bit younger. As far as the comics goes, if you want to check out some Booster Gold in comics, I haven't read much, but there is a really cool small series called Blue and Gold. It is Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, which is pretty cool. I've checked out like the first issue, but by far my favorite comics that I've read featuring Booster Gold is Batman the Gift. So Booster Gold obviously comes from the future, and with this story there's some different timeline madness going on, and in this universe Batman is like a murderous psychopath pretty much. Front of the cover is like Booster Gold must die. Jason Todd's in this, and Booster Gold teams up with Catwoman in one of the issues. I have not read the third issue yet. I can't find it anywhere. I've pretty much given up hope, but I have the first two and I've enjoyed it so far. And look guys, that is everything that's on the slate for chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. Where I'm personally at right now is I'm not excited for everything. I'm not gonna lie and say that I am, but there are some things that I really am excited for. I hope some of these comic book and TV show and movie recommendations that I gave you to prepare for this new phase or slate of the DCU helps you out a little bit. Anyways, it's your boy Eddie Knight. This is Nerdy Before It Was Cool, and I'm out.